If I were to ask you who the better rival is between Blue and Berry, who would you choose? Chances are, most of you would pick Blue. But why? What makes one better than the other? To answer that question, we first need to answer the question, what is a rival? While the answer may seem obvious at first, there's actually quite a few key details that make a world of difference and are the reason why characters like Dawn and Arven don't count as rivals, but Wally and Gladion do. Overall, I think the answer to what is a rival can be broken down into three main traits. First, rivals are main characters who have similar goals to that of the player. This can be as simple as becoming champion or filling out the Pokédex, to more abstract goals like becoming stronger. Second, rivals are battled multiple times throughout the story. This distinction is important for Arven and Penny's classification as non-rivals. It's also why some of the less impactful characters like the kids from X and Y still count as rivals, as you battle each of them a few times throughout the game. And third, rivals motivate the player to become a better trainer. This is a bit more subjective, but every rival in the franchise pushes the player to be better in some way. While many do this through positive reinforcement, there's quite a few that take a more negative approach. Think more Naruto and Sasuke as opposed to Gon and Killua, if you know what I mean. I won't go through everyone in detail, but every rival you see on screen pushes the player to be a better trainer in some way, even if you have to squint at it. I'm sure you can argue that Tierno's dance moves inspire somebody. So now that we have a baseline for what qualifies a character as a rival, we can look into the titular question, what makes a Pokemon rival great? And look, I'll be honest with you, I can't really answer the question. Wait, no, don't click off the video, let me explain. The main problem with answering this question is its subjective nature. What I think makes a rival great may be completely different than what you think. Not only that, but factors like character dialogue, design, and even their team rosters can heavily affect people's opinions. Just think about how much people dunk on Trevor for his hair. And I mean literally dunk, kid's got a basketball for a head. That being said, there is a general consensus among most fans on which rivals are towards the top of the list and which ones are towards the bottom. And while I could go over every one of them in depth to answer the question, I think the answer can yet again be broken down into three main traits. First of which, they need to be present. While that may sound like a no-brainer at first, there's actually two aspects that make up presence for a rival. The first of which is obvious. They just need to be there. Rivals like Clara and Avery will always be towards the bottom for most people for this exact reason. And if you just went, who the hell are Clara and Avery? Exactly. These two are from the Sword and Shield DLC, The Isle of Armor, which makes them the only rivals to not be a part of the base game. Kind of hard to consider them rivals if you can avoid them completely. Outside these two, Wally is a really good example of lacking presence. In Ruby and Sapphire, your relationship with him is help him catch a Pokemon, battle him once in front of the Mauville Gym, and battle him in Victory Road. With only 3 encounters in the entire game, it's hard to argue that Wally was really there throughout the story. And this leads me to the second aspect of what it means to be present: having an impact. Even if a rival is physically present throughout the course of the game, it doesn't mean a lot if they aren't doing anything. Basically, every X and Y rival comes to mind, as almost everyone who's played through these games agree that they're pretty useless. They may pop up a lot, but each interaction is basically, hey, we're your rivals, but also your friends. Okay, bye. A rival that has no purpose in the story might as well not be there. Not only does a rival need to be consistently present throughout the story, their presence needs to have a significant impact. Otherwise, they're basically no different than any other trainer. The second factor that makes a rival great, and arguably the most important one, they need to be compelling. I've played through Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald more than any other games, and they're some of my favorites in the franchise, but I've never once loved them for the rivals. I don't want to keep saying bad things about Wally, so let's just look at May and Brendan. The most glaring problem here is that they stop showing up in the middle to late game. You may have a few conversations with them, but they serve next to no purpose after giving you the HM for Fly right around the 6th gym. But even early in the game where they show up a ton, they aren't that interesting. They help out the player a lot, but as a whole, these two simply lack any engaging qualities. Even characters like Blue and Silver, who lack a bit of complexity upon their debut, still feel engaging as the competitive rivals they're written to be. Obviously, these two go on to have a lot more depth, but even at their start, they had this compelling aspect to them that Brendan and May just don't have. When you look at the last few generations of main series games, Game Freak has really been focusing a lot on writing a good story, and many of the rivals show that off well. In fact, starting in Gen 7, I would say basically every rival has a well-written and fleshed out story, even if it's not always a story people enjoy. But out of every generation, I think Gen 5 is the best in terms of compelling rivals. Cheren and Bianca both have their own unique storylines that intertwine well with the themes of the game. And even better, you get to see their growth as characters spill over into Black and White 2, where Cheren is a gym leader and Bianca is a professor's assistant. But by far, the stars of these games are N and Hugh. I could make a whole video just about these two rivals, but to keep it simple, N and Hugh have some of the most in-depth storylines of any rival, full of hardship and growth, all while feeling like a true rival to the player. To put it simply, a rival needs to be interesting. When you're with a character throughout the whole game, you want to be captivated by them, as it's a key factor in making them a great character. With these two factors out of the way, the final detail that makes a great rival is one that, until recently, I hadn't quite pieced out myself. It's what separates a good character from a good rival. It's what I think makes Cheren better than Bianca, Nimona better than Hop, and Blue better than Barry. Your rival needs to actually be a rival. That meaning, they need to challenge the player. Let's take Blue, N, and Gladion. When you come across these rivals in game, they can genuinely cause you some trouble. I can distinctly remember losing to each of these guys, and I'm glad they gave me such a challenge. Meanwhile, I've never once lost to Brendan or May, or anybody from Gen 6 for that matter, especially not Trevor. If a rival can't even challenge the player, then they don't really deserve the label of a rival. Again, I'll bring up Naruto and Sasuke. I know this is a Pokémon channel, but this argument works very well. If one of these two was massively ahead of the other, their story as rivals wouldn't have been nearly as interesting. It's much harder to get people invested in a rivalry if it's pretty much one-sided. So now let's go back to the beginning of the video where I asked who's a better rival between Blue and Barry. Blue and Barry both have a great amount of presence in the story, being fairly integral to their plot. They're also both pretty compelling characters. Blue is your snarky rival and Barry is the loudmouth childhood friend. And then you look at who is a better challenge. Your last fight with Barry in the main game is right before you enter the Elite Four. Meanwhile, Blue's waiting at the end of it. He's already become champion. And because he's the only rival to have ever beaten you at your own game, most people would agree that Blue will always be one of the greatest rivals, if not the #1 best. At the end of the day, like I said earlier, the answer is up to the individual. But if you ask me, I think to be one of the greats, you have to be present, compelling, and above all else, a true rival. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you're interested, click the link in the description to join my new Discord server. That's where all the cool kids hang out. I know that sounded uncool, but I promise it's a pretty chill server. Anyways, hope y'all have a good one, and as thanks for making it to the end of the video, here's a picture of my dog. Talk to y'all soon.